I'm Farhan Dalla, transformational trainer, and welcome to Elevate Your Life, a transformational podcast, an invitation to take the journey towards your deepest self. It is my intention to inspire you to connect, move, and meditate. We'll tap in, tune in, and dive in, and together learn and reflect from authentic, real, and transformative conversations. Let's get started. Welcome back to season 2 of Elevate Your Life, a transformational podcast. This season is called Queer Relief, and my very first episode is titled In My Own Words and Finally on My Terms. I would like to preface this episode by saying this is probably going to be the most vulnerable I have ever been in my life. Having said that, I feel I was pretty vulnerable in season 1 when I talked about my grief journey and the immense loss that I have experienced since mom's transitioning, which I continue to work through every day. If there's one thing I've learned is that grief never leaves you, but somehow you manage to carry on, and that grief just simply becomes a part of your existence. Season 2 was inspired by my very close friend, multidisciplinary artist Mariam Moxie, who was also a guest of season 1, where we dove into the topic of art and grief relief. Mariam is an incredible human being whose art has had a huge impact on many communities. And I recommend you have a listen to our episode if you haven't already done so, and also follow her on Instagram. I could go on for hours about her work. After we chatted on my podcast, Mariam left me a message suggesting that I may want to consider my second season to be called Queer Relief and talk to queer people of color from various backgrounds. Mariam also suggested that episode 1 could be about my story, and that the subsequent episodes would center around creating a safe space for other queer folks to discuss their challenges and journey with me. Now, I loved this idea, but it also created a lot of anxiety and fear. And as I dive into this episode, you'll understand why. It's not that I'm not out and people don't know that I'm gay. I'm not in the closet, but I am fully out. However, I have yet to really share publicly my journey and my story, in particular, my coming out story as a gay man. And I have yet publicly talked about my struggles as a gay man. As a result, I sat on it for quite some time, in fact, several months. And every time I thought about sitting down and recording my story, I panicked, I felt fear and anxiety, I procrastinated. And so it took quite some time for me to really get to the place where I could dive into where those feelings were coming from. And I've reflected on that, and maybe I'll share some of that with you today. But the truth is, I'm still working through some of it as well. As I take you along my journey with this episode, as well as with the guests I'll be speaking with, it is really my hope that I can continue to be vulnerable and talk about my struggles and come into my wholeness while still making this a safe space that Mariam and I had talked about for others in the LGBTQ plus community, especially for brown and Black folks. It is my intention to send a message out there to all those who are struggling, to let them know that they are not alone. They don't have to live in fear of isolation, that there are many others who are here to support them. And as we unpack our conversations, that there are words of wisdom and golden keys to help them to open their doors and help them to come out and just be comfortable with who they are. So that they can live their life in complete authenticity, allowing them to be themselves fully. In January of this year, that is 2023, I made a vision board. And at the very top, I wrote the following intention: I am stepping into my wholeness and living my life to the fullest expression of who I am, authentically and unapologetically. I wrote this because the truth is that I feel I'm still on the journey to get there as a gay man. There's parts that I'm still, I guess, figuring out. There's a part of me that is waiting to be birthed. I am curious as to where my journey will eventually lead me. Insert, take a deep breath. Okay, here we go. My coming out was a difficult and long process. Some of it took place in incremental small phases where I had control over my narrative. They were huge steps for me, but nothing prepared me for some of the more traumatic parts where I was outed a few times and in the worst possible ways. At the age of 29, I found it really hard to continue to live a secret life. Well, secret life should be really in quotes because, to be honest, it wasn't that big of a secret. I never really had a girlfriend, and most of my friends knew. They were just waiting for me to tell them. But around this time, I started dating men, and I got my first boyfriend. And so my boyfriend at the time was out. I could tell that having to keep us a secret from our friends and family, that is my friends and family, was impacting our relationship. He said that he would be patient and that he understood, but I knew it was troubling him, but it was also troubling me. It was time for me to face my truth and to come to terms with who I am. I was scared. I seeked out the help of what I want to say is a spiritual therapist, someone who could explain to me at the deepest level what this journey was about on a soul level as much as a physical, and how to navigate it for myself and for my relationships with my friends and family, and of course, my boyfriend. I'll never forget this day. I remember her looking at me right in the eyes and saying to me, Farhan, you exercise regularly, you go to the gym, you take care of your health and your body, you have this career in fitness. But if there is a part of you that you have anger or self-rejection towards, then that negative emotion will manifest in your body in a disease and likely in a body part where you're holding that negativity. It could turn into a disease that could impact your health and maybe even your life. And in that moment, it was like I woke up and I thought to myself, I'm not going to the gym or exercising and eating right just so that my unhealthy emotions could result in my own disease or even death. That didn't make sense to me. Before I continue, I just want to put a disclaimer here. I'm in no way implying that I'm claiming there is a connection between our emotional state of well being and disease, but it did make sense to me that how I feel about myself can have an impact on my physical body. So I asked her, what is my next step? What do I need to do to learn to accept myself? And in fact, possibly save my life. To accept the fact that I am gay. She said the first step was to come out to myself. And I never thought of it that way, that I had to first come out to me and to be able to say those words. She instructed me to look into a mirror and into my eyes and say the words, I am gay. And then the next step would be to walk in that truth, quite literally, with every step. And that as I take steps to say the words and to know that that is my truth. And by doing so, to accept that truth within me and every cell in my body, to literally walk in that truth. It was not an easy task. Looking into the mirror with complete authenticity and into my eyes and saying those words brought on a lot of discomfort. But I did what she said, and I followed her instructions. And that began my true coming out moment. I knew that from this point on, there was no going back. When I think about it in hindsight, I probably shouldn't have begun getting into a relationship until I was out, at least for me, because I wasn't able to fully be available and offer who I was because I was still discovering who I was. And I hadn't come to terms with that just yet. But I am grateful for what the relationship offered. I did begin to understand what could be possible. But for many reasons, that relationship came to an end. And not just because I wasn't quite ready to come out. He broke my heart. He cheated on me with a mutual friend. And in my heartache, I finally came out to one of my best friends. It was the first time I said the words to someone else, and someone who was very close to me, someone who had known me for years. It was the beginning of feeling free while at the same time feeling immense pain because of the ending of my first relationship. I couldn't function and I needed to get away. And so I booked a flight to Montreal the weekend we broke up. And I asked my best friend for a ride to the airport. While driving to the airport with tears coming down my face, I told her everything. That was the transitioning point of coming out to myself by telling my loved ones. And with the support of my friend, as well as my spiritual therapist, I was able to work through that pain and continue the work that I needed to do on myself. Fortunately, I had also made a few gay friends. When you first come out, it's important to find others like you, to find a safe space, a tribe consisting of a supportive group of people who are there for you and understand and can relate to your journey. And they were there for me as well. As I grew more comfortable with my truth, I started to share that I was gay with a handful of my closest friends outside of my tribe, friends that have known me for much of my life. And each time I was met with complete love and support. My spiritual counselor or therapist suggested that I talk to my closest friends first because it would help me build my community of support. People who have known me for years. And it was hard. I'm not going to lie. It was not easy. Though there were no surprises by my declaration, I am pleased to say that I was met with reassurances and, most importantly, non judgment and love. Everyone said to me that this didn't change anything. But for me, it did, and in a positive way, because now they get to know all of me, all the parts of me, especially the part that I was hiding. I think the biggest fear I had was that if I came out, I would be rejected by my family and my friends. In regards to my family, I grew up in a conservative family, a Muslim family, and very religious. We went to our mosque regularly and were completely immersed in our community. Our household was quite patriarchal, and I knew that there was no way that I could ever come out, especially to my father. It was what he said, but also the things he didn't say. There was a spoken, but also an unspoken understanding that he was against the idea of homosexuality. When I was growing up, I did not know one gay person. There were no gay family members and none that we knew of before I was born. There was no social media at that time where you could connect with someone, make friends, reach out for assistance or help by finding groups and organizations that were available to help closeted gay men. There was no one in the media that looked like me, no characters on TV or in movies that were gay. The intersection of South Asian male gay did not exist in my universe. And so growing up was an isolating experience and one which forced me to pretend to be anything other than who I truly am. I felt like there was no one I could talk to, not a friend, not a teacher. In truth, I lived in constant fear, especially going through my high school years. There was a lot of homophobia at that time. You would hear the comments or so-called locker room talk. I did not know of one other gay person at my high school. There probably were others, but likely just as scared to come out like me. I had a lot of friends, some of which were boys and some of which were girls. I hung out with a good group of people, but it wasn't a space that I felt safe enough to be my true self. When it came to things like prom or dances, I pretended to be straight and had girls for dates. It was a difficult time because all your friends are exploring relationships and dating, and my life consisted of pretending and hiding. I knew that if I came out, I would have been ostracized, which is why coming out was not an option, not in high school, and for me, not even in university. But there were rumors about me within and outside my circle of friends. Some of my friends told me about the rumors. And whenever I heard about the rumors, I would go into damage control, making sure I was seen with a girl or pretending to be interested in one, just denying, denying, denying. I don't think I was really good at it, to be honest. And I'm not sure if I really fooled anyone. But in my head, I kept telling myself and feeding myself all these falsehoods and somehow convinced myself that I was straight. My struggles intensified in university to a whole other level. Rumors were going around because I didn't have a girlfriend. I kind of dated girls to discredit the rumors. And I was lying to everyone, but I was also lying to myself. I tried to shove down my feelings and ignore the part of me that was attracted to men. I even acted like I was some sort of player, but I'm not sure if I really fooled anyone. The first family member I came out to was my sister. Out of everyone in my family, I felt close enough to tell her. I told my friends I was going to tell her, and they were incredibly supportive. I knew at that point I had a tribe. and chosen family standing beside me, it was time. The conversation went partially well. By that, I mean, she told me she already knew. She said, Farhan, I'm your bigger sister. I helped raise you, and I knew. I was waiting for you to tell me. Okay, I thought that makes sense. There were no surprises there. And I'm not surprised by the fact that she wasn't surprised, but here's where the conversation went sideways. She revealed that someone had already told her. She couldn't recall who it was. It had been a few years. I think I went pale. Who would do that? I thought it couldn't have been a friend, but it got worse. She didn't keep this information a secret. This was something that she feared for me, for my health and safety. And not knowing what to do, she told my two brothers. This was not the conversation I was expecting. My coming out was taken away from me. I no longer had control over my narrative thanks to some jerk who outed me. Now, keep in mind, my brothers are a lot older and, like my dad, have very conservative views. What did they say? I asked. She said they're just going to ignore it. And so I interpreted ignore it to mean ignore me. Great. So all this time they knew. I mean, what else would I expect from a traditional family? Everything that is taboo is treated with silencing. We just don't talk about these things. She had suggested many times in the past that I consider moving to a different city or country as my fitness career was really taking off. And now I knew why. She was trying to protect me. She wanted me to get away. She also knew my parents would never accept me. I took a deep breath and I asked, did you tell mom or dad? And to that, she replied, no, I didn't. But she said that mom keeps asking me why you aren't getting married. And she said, I just keep telling her to leave you alone and that when you decide, you will let us know. She kept giving mom hope. I didn't get upset with her for that. I could see that she didn't have any answers. So what could she do in that situation? But she did tell me that she had a gay coworker and she spoke to him for advice. She even went to Pride in her city of Vancouver. She read some books and did what she could do to educate herself. She was just scared that something terrible would happen to me. She knew the world wasn't always safe for LGBTQ plus people. And for that, I appreciated her. At least she was trying. Everyone else would continue to treat me as though that part of me didn't exist. And then she said something interesting. She said, whatever you do, don't end up in like a newspaper or on TV. And I thought that was kind of weird. But anyway, we continued our conversation in Toronto's gay village. We went for a walk and we met up with some of my gay friends. I introduced them to her and told them about my coming out. It was nice to have some community support that day. We both had a lot to process. It wasn't the conversation I expected, but at least things were out in the open, at least with her. The Toronto gay nightclub scene was really how I came to meet and know the tribe I formulated. Around that time, there was a well-established LGBTQ plus South Asian scene that was exploding in popularity called Funk Asia. It drew to the dance floor Bollywood music fans who found a safe space to connect with other members of the LGBTQ plus community, specifically South Asian. It was held once a month in the heart of Toronto's gay village. The popularity of these events also drew a straight crowd who loved the energy, the music, and inclusivity. The event was organized at the time by a woman named DJ Zara, a very out and proud and South Asian member of the queer community. It was a scene that I did not partake in. I told people it wasn't my jam, but in hindsight, I think I was afraid people would assume I was gay if I went. And I was very much closeted at that time, apart from my few close friends and my chosen tribe. Plus, I did not want to risk any further rumors. However, I knew Zara, and she asked if I would attend the event in honor of her 30th birthday. It was a special anniversary date for Funk Asia. Around September of 2003, it was the fifth anniversary of its run, and this event would be the final. She decided to end Funk Asia along with her birthday celebrations, and she was going to go out with a bang. So Zara asked me to help out during the cake cutting ceremony. Basically, I would need to put on a Roman outfit, complete with headgear, etc. And I would be shirtless, I might add, and I'd have to escort her from the DJ booth to the cake for the cake cutting ceremony. I knew it would be risky, but I think at that point, I figured it was the last event. And since it was Zara's birthday, I'd attend. Well, everything was going according to plan. However, I was not prepared for what came next. Zara failed to inform me that the event would be covered by a lot of media, and not just local media, but national media. We're talking MTV, the Toronto Star, and Canada's national newspaper, the Globe and Mail. I had no idea Funk Asia had become such a phenomenon. This event was groundbreaking because it was a queer event for South Asians, and the organizer, Zara, was a lawyer by day, DJ at night, who also happened to be queer and female and South Asian. Keep in mind, this is at a time period before cell phones and cameras and whatnot. So if you were closeted and you went to a nightclub, specifically a gay nightclub, you were pretty much safe from being exposed via pictures and videos that could potentially appear on social media feeds. And there was a general understanding of ensuring that the community was safe. So if you were in a gay nightclub with other gay people, that was a safe space for you. And I went there with that assumption. And I was caught with a frenzy of photographers and flashbulbs as I escorted Zara to the cake. I stood next to her as she cut the cake, and the look on my face must have spoken volumes. Who are all these people? I thought. What's with the cameras and the video cameras? What's going on here? After the cake cutting ceremony was over, I stuck around for a little bit, but then I left. And there was this nervous feeling in my gut. The next day, I went to see Zara because it was troubling me so much. And so I asked who were the photographers and the videographers present and why were they there? To my complete horror, I learned of the major media that was there to cover the event. I told her that there was no way that a picture of me could appear anywhere and that it would be a complete disaster if my family or my work found out. My family was one thing, but I had no idea how this would play out for me at the clinic where I worked as a physiotherapist at that time. Zara told me that she would call the reporters and make sure that there were no pictures of me published. I left with a feeling of relief, thinking we were able to shut down the possibility of this getting out. A week went by and I didn't hear anything. My dad read the Toronto Star every day, and I checked the paper to make sure there were no stories about Funk Asia. I figured this was all behind me. As I mentioned earlier, I work in the fitness industry, and around that time, my fitness career was growing. I got a contract with Reebok and was one of Canada's Reebok master trainers, and I had just shot a workout TV show called In Shape with Sharon Mann, and it was broadcast all over Canada, the United States, and in several parts of the Caribbean. In Toronto, I was teaching all kinds of fitness classes like step aerobics and spinning, and I was just starting to become a public figure. It was just over a week since I had attended Funk Asia. It was a Saturday morning, and I was about to teach a spinning class at the North York YMCA. As I was setting up my music, getting my bike together and my microphone, one of my regular participants came up to me to say hi. She said, "Hey, by any chance, were you at some funk event last week?" Now, this woman was not South Asian and definitely straight. So I looked up from the stereo player, and I'm sure she must have noticed the blood leaving my face and even hear how fast my heart began to pace. And I looked at her in the eyes and I said, "What are you talking about?" And she said, "Well, I saw this article in the Globe and Mail this morning, and there was a picture, and I'm pretty sure it was you." And she said, "I recognize those pecs anywhere," as though wanting to sound complimentary. And by the way, I brought a copy of the paper. It's in my locker. I said, "Can I see it?" She said, "Sure, I'll go grab it. I'll be right back." Now, in the meantime, the room was filling up and it was time for me to start the class. I waited a couple of minutes, but I knew everyone was eager to get pedaling. I could feel all eyes giving me that look like, let's get this class started. So I turned on the music and I began leading the class. About a minute into the warm up, she returned with the newspaper and placed it on the stereo system, which was to my immediate left. She grinned a bit as she placed the newspaper on the stereo system and then went to her bike. As I continued to lead the warm up, I turned to my left, and there on the front cover of the entertainment section of the Globe and Mail, a national Canadian newspaper, was a picture of Zara and a shirtless me in a Roman outfit standing next to her. And the headline read, "I had no idea you could be gay and Indian." I didn't know if my heart was racing because I was leading a spinning class or because of what I just saw. Perhaps both. But in that moment, I had 20 people in front of me, and I had to get through what would be one of the hardest classes I have ever taught in my life. When it was over, I grabbed the paper and ran out of there. I'm dead, I thought. This is it. I ran to my locker thinking this was pretty bad. I checked my phone, and there were a ton of missed calls and voice messages. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. Concerned friends, including those that knew I was gay, but also those that knew but I hadn't had the conversation with, were calling me. I think I still feel the trauma from that experience. In fact, just talking about it still brings back that horrific feeling. I had to live with the fear that someone was going to say something to my parents, my family, what was going to happen to me at work. I was I wasn't too concerned about my job at Reebok or the fitness industry. There were a lot of openly gay working people in the industry, but and openly gay that is, but I hadn't come out to any of them. I was starting to become a public figure in the fitness industry. I worked as a physiotherapist with some of Canada's greatest athletes. I was on a daily morning workout show called In Shape with Sharon Man. My head was spinning. I called I called a friend freaking out, and he suggested I come over and gather my thoughts. While I was driving there, I was stopped at a traffic light. At that time, my physio practice was in a very well-known gym in Toronto. There were professionals, there were professional athletes, including Olympians training there, and some of whom were also my clients. One of the trainers from the gym happened to be crossing the street where I was at the traffic light waiting, and she saw my car. She ran right over to me. I rolled down the window and she said, "Oh my God, I saw you in the paper. Did you see it?" I said, "Yes, I did. Now, please be careful and try not to get run over. I'll see you at work on Monday." I didn't realize so many people read that newspaper. I was on the front cover of the entertainment section. I went to my friend's place and I could tell he was really worried for me. This was a nightmare. My control over my own coming out was again taken away from me, and in the worst possible way. The title of the article, "I didn't know you could be gay and Indian," was so tabloid like. They weren't even my words. They took a quote from an attendee at the event and used it for the headline of the article along with my picture. It was as if the focus of the article wasn't even on DJ Zara and the incredible event she had created for South Asians in Toronto's LGBTQ community. But what transpired for me? Well, I feared that my world just blew up. And maybe it was my fault for going. I think that if I knew that the media was going to be there, there is no way I would have attended. My friend looked at me and with fear in his eyes said, "What are you going to do?" I said, "I'm not sure, but I guess I'll have to face whatever the consequences were going to be." There was no rock big enough for me to crawl under. I made an appointment with my spiritual therapist. I knew and appreciated that she was going to be completely honest with me. And she was. She said, "Well, at least it's out now and you don't have to worry about telling people." It's not what I wanted to hear, but there was no going back now. I just didn't know how I was going to handle my family and work. Maybe if I had the courage to tell my family, I wouldn't have been in this situation. See, she suggested that I tell them even if they didn't know by now, but it was too much for me. I wanted this crazy nightmare to go away. I really leaned on my friends at that time. They were all on my side and everyone was really supportive. And I just kept thinking I have no choice but to face the consequences. The picture on the front cover was me. My friends recognized me, my patients, coworkers, and participants from my fitness classes. I couldn't deny it even if I tried. The truth was in my face, and I was pissed. Though I was still trying to figure out how I wanted to come out, that was all taken away from me. I think in some way, telling my story this way on my own podcast is giving me back some control. It's been 20 years since that day, and I'm still processing some aspects of this. Fortunately, this is not the way my parents came to know that their son is gay. I don't know how I dodged that bullet. Maybe it was universal intervention, but thankfully, no one called to tell my parents or brought it up to them at our mosque. I have no idea if anyone said anything to my siblings, because if they did, they sure didn't bring it up with me. But things were notably different at work. Word got out to several trainers. Some of them brought the article to show everyone at work. Some of my patients mentioned that they had seen it. I just shrugged it off like it was nothing. There wasn't any direct retaliation, and if my employers knew about it, they didn't say anything. But I did notice that many of the hockey players that trained at our gym and came for physio didn't come back to see me again. If that was the worst of it, then I figured I would be secure with my job and I would have to just keep my head high, keep doing my job. If the hockey players were a bunch of homophobes, then I didn't want to treat them anyway. But I was angry, sad, and I was scared. This was all happening around 2003 in Canada, and still 2 years before same-sex marriage was legalized in our country nationally. We were still fighting for equal rights, to be able to legally be seen and know that our relationships were just as valid as straight couples. I remember thinking I wasn't too attached to the outcome of the fight. For me, even if same-sex marriage was legalized, it wouldn't impact my life because I didn't see how my parents would ever accept the fact that I was gay, let alone marry another man. As far as I was concerned, it wasn't even a possibility for me. However, when the Civil Marriage Act was passed on July 20th, 2005, same-sex marriage was legalized nationwide across Canada. And there was a shift for me and for all members of the LGBTQ plus community. But I celebrated with continued silence. I'm going to end part 1 of my coming out journey here. In part 2, I share with you all what happened on that significant day when I finally had the conversation with my mom, when she learned the truth, how it went down, and how it impacted our relationship. I'm Farhan Dalla. Thank you for taking the time to listen to today's episode of Elevate Your Life, a Transformational podcast. I hope today's conversation has elevated you in some way and inspired you to connect, move, and meditate. I'd really appreciate your support by following and rating this podcast. Come back soon and join me for another transformative conversation.